Welcome to the Humans Outside podcast, where we explore life in the great outdoors from our perch in Alaska while hearing from fascinating outside-minded guests. I'm Amy Bouchatz, and since September 2017, I've spent at least 20 consecutive minutes outside every single day. On this show, we hear from others who make heading into nature just a part of who they are too. Are you ready? Let's go! When you find yourself completely outside your comfort zone, you have two options. Dig in and wait for it to be over, or embrace the change. Let's face it, change is super hard. For military families, that change is basically constant. The average military family moves to an entirely new place once or every 2 or 3 years. There are pros and cons to that. On the one hand, you have the opportunity to experience all kinds of diversity in new places. On the other hand, well, change is hard. Imagine resetting your friends and culture and even your belongings once every 2 or 3 years. It gets super old. For Hannah Wolt and Jennifer Everheart, change meant moving to Guam with the U.S. military and, ultimately, changing their lives to be so outdoor-focused that they started a military-focused hiking club, Military Wild. Hannah and Jennifer, welcome to the Humans Outside podcast.
Thank you.
Hey, so good to be here.
So we start every show by imagining ourselves talking to our guests in their favorite outdoor spaces. So Hannah, you first. Where are we talking to you today? Or maybe we're on a tour and visiting multiple locations. So where are we? What are we doing?
All right. We are in the lower canyons of the Big Bend area of Texas. It's a stretch of river. It's about 84 miles outside of Big Bend National Park. It's like about a 10-day canoe trip through just the most beautiful remote desert landscape you've ever seen. There's like towering canyon cliffs that run along the river like hundreds of feet high. There's little rapids. Sometimes you run across like wild cows and things roaming around. And at nighttime, the stars are like the craziest stars you've ever seen in your life. Like you can see the glow of the Milky Way galaxy, like laying in your sleeping bag, looking up with like the glow of the campfire next door.
That sounds amazing. Jennifer, where are we with you?
For me, we are in a tiny little beach called Sharks Cove on the island of Guam. It's a short little hike across beautiful sandy white beaches to this remote little beach where no one ever is for some reason, with crystal clear bright blue water that you can see miles away from. And it's so warm, toes in the sand, water lapping quietly at the beach shores. Perfect.
That sounds absolutely magical. So, as a military spouse myself, I, of course, know the challenge of moving around, and becoming an outdoor focus is so closely tied to that in my own military spouse story. Has spending time in nature always been a part of your stories?
Yeah, so for me, I grew up like playing outside and stuff all the time. On family vacations, we would do really short hikes and like stop at overlooks and everything. But I didn't really get into like truly hiking and really getting active in the outdoors until college. I went to Texas Tech University and worked for the outdoor program there. And that was really my introduction into the outdoors and learning like lots of new technical skills, getting comfortable with like my boundaries and learning things that I hadn't done before, and also getting to teach other people. So really it's been since college that I've really gotten into like the outdoor space in a more like active routine kind of way.
Yeah, for me, it's just, I grew up similar to Hannah, always outside, always outdoors, playing in the woods, walking on trails. It was just part of our family tradition, I guess you could say. But as far as getting constantly outdoors and really making it a focus in my life, it honestly wasn't until 3-ish years ago when we moved to Guam and I was working from home. And so I had all this free time and I thought, why not explore my surroundings while I'm here? And just took that leap of faith and went for it.
So tell me about Military Wild because it sounds like that's sort of a natural progression. Our listeners may not know about the military life, but when you're stationed somewhere where there's not a lot of people that clubs are a very normal thing, and of course, if you're in a place where you really don't know, maybe you don't want to get out there by yourself. So tell me about Military Wild, how that got started.
Um, so I guess I'll go first. Um, so when my husband and I first moved to Guam, for about the first year to year and a half, I had trouble like connecting with other people and really finding like a close group of friends. Guam is an especially difficult place, just even compared to a lot of other military bases, because you're so far from home. It's a lot harder for like spouses and family members to find jobs there. So I wasn't getting any kind of fulfillment in like my career, like professional aspirations or anything while we were there either. Um, and so finally, my mom was diagnosed with cancer like our first Christmas that we were there. And so like I was going through all these emotions and stuff and just really struggling to like feel connected to where we were living and feel happy and fulfilled while we were there. So my husband and I ended up going on a vacation to New Zealand where we were like getting out and hiking all the time again. And it had been so long since I had done that on a regular basis. And while we were there, I was like, man, this is like what I've been needing. This is what I've been missing. And I hadn't even really realized it. So as soon as we got back to Guam, I was like, okay, I need people to hike with. So like I'm gonna make friends, like no matter what it takes. I'm just gonna like put it out there and see if other people want to go hiking. Cause like I know I'm not the only one. I can't be the only one that's struggling with those kinds of things. So we got back to Guam. I posted in like one of the spouse Facebook pages and was basically just like, hey, I want to start a hiking group. Who else is interested? Like who else wants to join? And like I was super scared because I'm very introverted and like I don't like put myself out there when it comes to like getting groups together and things very often. But the amount of people that commented and like showed their interest and everything was crazy. So started the Facebook group. Jen was one of the first people that came out and like met up. And she and I and what ended up being the rest of our board joined shortly after. And it kind of took off from there.
Yeah, I remember seeing Hannah's post and I was like, sure, heck yes, I'm going to do this. And so I went out that first time. I feel like it was Tengiz into Sharks Cove, the beach I was talking about.
Yeah, I think it was.
And I mean, I had a great time and I was like, oh yeah, I've hiked up, all over Guam past couple of years I've been here. So I'll totally lead some hikes for you. And it just kind of took off from there.
How many people joined the club? How many people are a member now?
Oh gosh. Okay. Let's see. So just in our Guam chapter, there's like over 1,000 people that are in the Facebook group. Um, and then at our various other like chapters around the country, it's anywhere from like 50 to, how many do you have at Washington, Jen?
I believe we just hit 700.
Okay. Yeah. So then,
Oh.
but then as far as like actual Military Wild paid members, I think we have just over 300 right now that have like paid for the membership and have like donated and supported to our efforts to slowly become a nonprofit, go through that process.
So, two things. One, just for everybody who's listening, neither of you are still in Guam. One of you is in Washington and one of you is in Texas, right? And then two, you do have a paid membership and then you have a non-paid membership. So tell me about that, what the membership is for. Talk to us a little bit about that.
So our membership currently is $10 annually. It gets you into any events nationwide. Some of our chapters are currently paid members only, and other ones are open to all members. It will also get you special perks depending on your location, free birthday hikes where you'll get a sweet treat at the end. We know birthdays are difficult for military members. You're not always by people you know and not always by family, and spouses are gone and all that jazz. We want to make sure that no matter where you are, you feel appreciated and loved. So it's one of our big goals, especially with the paid membership, to really fulfill and make it feel worth the annual cost. And then our free membership is basically just we have our Facebook groups. As long as we have an ambassador in the area, you can join those groups. They have scheduled hikes monthly, and you just come on, check the hikes out. Lots of pictures, lots of fun, meet new people, meet new friends. So that's always the goal.
Cool. And it's $10, right?
Yes, it's currently $10 annually.
Awesome. And I know that because I signed up. Haha.
Yay! I think I just mailed your patch like
You did.
a couple days ago.
Yes, I got it. Yes, you did.
Awesome.
Because I can get on board with a military hiking club, even though we have no chapter here. Full disclosure.
I see
I
an
could support
ambassador coming. New ambassador.
that. So, you do have multiple locations though. So tell us about that. Where are you located?
Okay, let's see. I got to work my way from like the East Coast over. Okay, I'll say what I can remember, and then Jen, you let me know what I've left out. So we have Virginia. We do have a chapter in like the DC, Maryland area. We're currently looking for a new ambassador there, though. So we don't have planned hikes there right now. We have Alabama, Texas. Texas is a huge state, so our main activities in Texas are based in Del Rio, where I am, and then also in San Antonio. We have a brand new chapter in New Mexico that just launched recently. Washington, Hawaii, Guam. Am I missing anything, Jen? Oh, we also are looking for an ambassador in North Carolina.
Some great hiking locations. Uh, I don't think about Texas as being hikey though. Tell me about that.
It's funny, I don't really either. um, yeah, Texas is interesting, and it really depends on what part of Texas you're in because it is such a big state. And so we have like, I think it's like the state's divided up into 5 different regions that are all drastically different from each other. So I grew up in the Dallas area actually and didn't really know very much hiking. I didn't know very much about hiking in Texas until I went to college and started doing more outdoorsy things. But here in Del Rio, we are a few hours away from quite a few state parks, and they're not like gorgeous, crazy mountain views, but there's like lots of beautiful wildlife. Texas is like one of the best places to go like bird watching if that's your kind of thing. We're also only 4 hours away from Big Bend National Park, which has some amazing hikes and does have mountain views. And then I know in like the San Antonio area, they've got lots of cool like hill country hikes. And I believe the city has some really pretty like green belts and stuff that run through it too. So there's tons of ways to get outside, even if it's not what you would generally think of as like, oh, we're going to go on like a really cool mountain hike that's 10 miles long and things like that.
Sure. So what you're saying is I'm being unfair to Texas right now.
I mean, I'm a little bit biased, but I do like the outdoor activities in Texas.
And it's beautiful there right now. It's a great time of year too.
Yes,
So,
spring and fall are the best.
so okay, although a part of the US, right, Guam is really unlike any stateside location, as we've just proven. If only due to the fact of it's located where it's located on the globe, right, and therefore its weather. Alaska's sort of the same way because you have to make some really unique considerations here. So tell me about the things you need to think about when you're spending a time outside in Guam that you don't think about in Texas.
I think probably the biggest adjustment for me was just being in a much more like humid and tropical environment. So like out here in Texas, the things that you watch out for on the trail are rattlesnakes and cactuses. And in Guam, you're watching out for giant monitor lizards and huge banana spiders that string webs across the trail, like right at face level. Um,
I can't even talk about. I can't.
Yeah, so we would always, it's like an ongoing tradition that anytime we lead hikes, the person in the front has to carry a spider stick. So, you like walk through the jungle waving your arm up and down like you're, I don't know, doing some kind of like ritualistic blessing.
Like I'm almost afraid to even talk about this on the podcast because now the internet algorithms are going to think that I have an interest in this topic and I do not.
You're going to get spider things popping up.
Yes, and I really, 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 really don't want that at all. In fact, one of the best things about Alaska to me is a lack of that. You know how like I won't use the word. Do you like that? So
Yeah.
Oh,
I have an unreasonable fear. I know that, and I'm okay with it. So well, I mean, okay, so you're in Guam, you're hiking to exotic waterfalls and beaches and animals I can't talk about. What else?
I think another thing that kind of surprised me was how much more quickly I went through like my shoes there. So here I had hiking boots that lasted like years, other than, how often and how many miles you put on hiking shoes. But in Guam, the climate is so wet that you're constantly hiking in mud and water, and it just destroys your shoes. I went through like 2 or 3 pairs of shoes. I think you did too, right, Jen?
Yeah, I did, and the limestone just tears up the bottom. You like good luck with any tread after a couple of months.
That's crazy. Jen, do you find, because you're in Washington, which is also notoriously wet, you think that
Oh
Guam was
yes.
worse on your stuff?
Well, the difference with Guam is you're walking through rivers and you're walking through streams and your feet get wet and you want them to get wet. It's okay if they get wet. And here, especially in the colder months, you don't want your feet to get wet. So you end up wearing like waterproof boots and shoes, which work a little differently than like trail runners in Guam, where you're like, yes, I need breathability. I need them to accept water and dry quickly. Whereas in here in Washington, you really want dry feet all of the time.
And you're
It's
saying, accept water because you're so warm? Is that the thinking? You're just blazing
yes,
hot?
and also oftentimes we've been in rivers where we've been up to our chest in water. So if you're wearing waterproof boots, that water's just going to seep in and it's not going to come out anytime soon.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Um, so, one of the most notorious things I've heard about Guam is about snakes and trees, okay? So, true or false? Guam is known for tree snakes that must periodically be eradicated by dead mice stuffed with Tylenol and dropped from the sky.
100% true.
Okay, am I, like, alone in the world and envisioning the mice with, like, tiny little I know, but tiny little parachutes and, like, they're, like, airborne? I don't know. Is that crazy? That's what's in my mind. I know that's not real, but I'm just saying.
Honestly, it was a fantastic Halloween costume for a couple of years.
Oh, man, that's amazing. Okay, so before the snakes eat the mice, what's the situation? Like, tree snakes? Kinda freaky. Am I wrong?
Very creepy. I only ever saw a few of them, and they were usually only at nighttime, like once it was starting to get dark. So we did a couple of sunset hikes, and we ran across one that was like all interested in our flashlight one time coming across the trail. I really didn't see that many, but we got there sort of at the tail end of the big eradication movement. So, which is crazy because the tree snakes are invasive, which is why they have to deal with them, and they have like decimated the bird population on Guam. And just in the small amount of time that we were there, I noticed a huge increase in the number of birds after they finished their big like eradication movement. So that's kind of a cool fun fact.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we got there a couple years earlier before Hannah. And when we got there, I remember mentioning that we never heard birds ever. You just don't hear birds. Come to find out that the snakes kill the birds, which then increase the spider population. Another, you know, fun throwing that out there. And just the difference in 3 years. When we left, we were constantly seeing swallows and sparrows flying through, and we would hear chirping and bird noises all the time, which to me means it was actually working, which is kind of amazing. But it is kind of creepy on a night hike when you pull back a tree and all of a sudden there's a snake staring you in the face.
Oh
And
my god. So, okay, so I'm sort of chuckling to myself because I live in Alaska, which is a place people think of as being very exotic, and when I talk to them, they have the same attitude towards me that I'm having about Guam right now, which is, how do you do it? How do you deal with the bears? Well, don't aren't you always at the, bear risk? Someone made a joke the other day about how we can't have a beehive. Somebody outside of Alaska. In fact, they were in Texas, said to me we couldn't have a beehive because it would attract grizzly bears. And I was like, no. So, but thanks,
yeah.
You never really understand a place until you've been there.
Well, exactly. And so I'm like, this is how I react to sort of those things. Or when we moved up here, I remember somebody asking us if we would if we could get rid of the bears that were apparently following us in his mind, by carrying fish and then throwing the fish in the opposite direction. And yeah, and I was like, "What?" Like, I hadn't even been here at that point, and I was like, "No, probably not," right? But, I mean, it's just it's funny to me because I'm really reacting to what you're saying as if you're talking about, like, this totally foreign, very exotic location, and, um, I am doing the same thing to you that people do to me that I think is so silly. So so does do like is my attitude because like this is again this is the attitude people give me, right? And that's very normal. Is my attitude towards you the way that people react when you say you've lived in Guam?
I would say definitely so. I think maybe not more so, but it's I feel like part of it is because nobody knows where Guam is. Like anytime we say, "Oh, we just came from Guam," or "Oh, we lived in Guam for a couple of years," people are like, "Oh, where's that?" And they have no idea. And to their credit, I didn't either. Like the day that we found out, it was like a big class party for my husband and his training class. They had like a big party where everybody finds out where they're going, and they said we were going to Guam, and I literally pulled out my phone and was like, oh my gosh, on Google Maps, like zooming in frantically, trying to figure out like where the heck this tiny island was. So I think that's a lot of it too, is that like people just have no idea like where it is, what it's like, what kinds of animals are there, what activities there are there. It's just like the unknown.
But it's an outdoor. I mean, it's an outdoor lover's paradise essentially.
Oh, absolutely. There's so many untouched areas and so many places where no one has ever been before, or no one on the like no locals have ever been or anything like that, that we got the chance to explore or venture off and find ourselves. And that's a once in a lifetime experience, definitely.
Hey humans, I want to tell you about a super exciting giveaway we're doing over at humansoutside.com. All you have to do is sign up for our newsletter and you'll be entered into a raffle to win a free Humans Outside decal, perfect for your water bottle or rocket box. Use it to brag to your friends that you are making spending time outside part of your everyday life. Head on over to humansoutside.com to sign up or visit the link in our podcast notes. Now, back to the show. So, Military Wild gave you new friends with a focus on the outside. You can get new friends on base in a lot of ways. All right, knitting, military spouse clubs, gym classes, right? So, is there a secret sauce involved with Military Wild because it's outside, because you're in nature? Do you think that's true?
I think there's
I think so.
Yeah, I think there's inherently something different about forming bonds with people and it's not just limited to outdoor activities, but I think outdoor activities are an awesome way to bring this about. Just in the fact that like some of the hikes that we would go on are still some of the hardest things I've ever done. Like one of the hikes climbing up Mount Schroeder is it's only like a few miles long, but it's like 800 feet up vertical the whole time. And so we had like a really small group when we did that hike the first time. And by the time we got to the top, there were like multiple people crying, like crying because they were exhausted, crying because they were overjoyed that we made it to the top. And there's just like no other thing that you can do together that's going to like bring that out in people in a place where they feel comfortable to express those kinds of emotions and like bond with each other that way. Like I had a super scary fall on a hike and like probably fractured my clavicle. I never went and got it checked, but I should have. And I had two ladies, one of whom, Kaylee, is one of our board members, like literally pulling my butt up the hill because I couldn't even like pull myself back up the rope. And it's just like being, which that is an unsafe situation, but being able to like push ourselves in ways that you can't in other places and activities and experiencing those kinds of things with each other is just like something that you can't get out of having dinner together or knitting class or whatever. And it's not that you shouldn't do those things, but it's just a great alternative avenue to really form bonds quickly and like push yourself and, you know, be physically active.
Yeah, I think definitely having a task to complete, like finishing a hike, really helps because it brings people that are introverted and extroverted kind of together, and the introverts can kind of hang back and breathe heavily along with the rest of us, and the extroverts can be super excited and kind of get everyone pumped up to keep going. So it's a nice area being outdoors to get everyone out of in their comfort zone, but out of it at the same time, because it creates this weird camaraderie, and you want to help everybody that's out there with you. So you just keep going.
Yeah, I feel that. I'm an introvert myself, and I have I like to do particularly really long adventures with other people. I run, so before we started recording, I said I was going to go for a run tonight. That'll be probably by myself, although it's a but even that is a pub run, right? So there are other people there. But when I go on really long adventures, I like to go or long runs. I like to go with a group of friends, and I call them my live podcast because they just chat, 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 and I run. And then every now and then I ask a question, you know, and the joke is always I make each of these gals tell me their life story or tell us their life stories. And I infamously start with, okay, so tell us about your life. Start with the day you were born, because we got time. Uh, but I have, they chat and I ask questions, and then I get to just kind of have my alone time, but also have some entertainment. So, but there is something about that. And we have become very close friends, right? Because of all this movement together. And I was thinking this week at some point, I'm going to have a, I call them my running wives. I'm going to have a running wives podcast because, with all these gals, because I mention them on this show so often, because I do really value their friendship. And I find that, that experience of running with them is something that's unique because we're outside. How has learning to be outdoorsy in a totally new place like Guam or like Texas, where you are now, or like Washington, okay, impacted other parts of your life? Obviously, the friendships are very important, but has it taught you to be different or better, maybe in other ways? And I hate this military-esque word, but get ready, resilient. What do you think?
I I mean, for me, I've always been adventurous, and I've always used the term like, "Oh, I get to explore new areas." But since Military Wild has come into my life, the term explore has taken on a completely different frame of mind for me. I basically, even if I don't feel like getting out there, I get out there to expand Military Wild, to get out there and explore new areas so I can take people to them versus just doing it for myself, because I want to make sure that people in Washington State or wherever we go to next feel included and involved and welcomed in the area that they are in. Because a lot of the times the military feel like outsiders, a little different from the pack, can't get into with like the locals or anything. But in all honesty, you can. You just have to put that foot forward and start walking.
Um, yeah, I mean, I would agree with Jen. I think I think a big part of especially starting Military Wild for me was it just sort of gave me like the motivation to get out of the house even on the days that I didn't want to, because I knew that like other people were counting on me to lead a hike or were going to come check on me if they hadn't seen me on a hike in a while because they were worried about me. Um and I think it's also just really impacted like my own sense of how important like your own mental and physical well-being is for every other aspect of your life. um, just like me being able to find an outlet for physical activity has played like a huge part in making me feel more fulfilled and less anxious and all that kind of stuff just in like my daily part of life. And I definitely feel a difference on like the weeks that I don't get outside as much, and things like that.
If you both had to give maybe two pieces of advice each to someone trying to head outside in a totally new place, maybe get over their nervousness about, something new or heading into nature and something new, what would you tell them? Hannah, you go first.
Um, let's see, two pieces of advice. I would probably say research and don't be afraid to start small. I always do. This is for sure something that I think I learned a lot more about in Guam. Was doing lots of research before you like get out and hit a trail or go to an area that you're not used to. So especially in Guam, there's a couple of hiking books. They sell out every time they make new prints because there's really just not that much info about the hiking trails and stuff in Guam. So we definitely got really good at embracing getting lost and trying to figure out where we were or how to get back to the trail or find our way. So that definitely has made me a lot more aware of doing a lot of research beforehand, especially if you're heading out to areas that don't have like good cell service or, there's not a whole lot of information. If it's not in like a state or local park, there might not be tons of trail information and things like that. And then, yeah, just don't be afraid to start small. Especially if you're in a new area, just starting to visit like local parks or really accessible like green belts and trails and things is a great way to potentially meet other people, or help get other people to go out with you so that you're not alone, because it's an easy activity and a great way to learn the area and just get used to like your new surroundings, or get used to getting outside, if it's a new part of your routine anyway.
That's great advice. Jen, what about you?
So I know it's going to be easier said than done, but honestly, just take that leap of faith. I know it's awkward going out with new groups, and I know it's hard to, get out of your comfort zone and go somewhere, but nothing's going to change unless you do it. So you just got to go for it. That's my number one piece of advice for anyone that I meet that's nervous about getting out hiking, like they've never been hiking before. They're not really outdoorsy people, but they want to be. It's always just, well, come out with me, try it. If you don't like it, that's fine. But you know what? You gotta start somewhere. So let's just go for it. And then my second piece would be kind of along the same lines as Hannah is be prepared. Know what to expect and try to prevent any emergency from happening. Make sure you bring water. Make sure you bring a first aid kit. Make sure your shoes are sturdy. Make sure you know somebody knows where you are. Make sure you do have cell service or at least some way to contact somebody. Know what's going to happen if something does go wrong.
4 pieces of great advice. Good job. Okay, so tell me, what is your favorite outdoor gear? This is sort of the part of the show where we just talk about the things that are left over, but I think this is actually pertinent to what you just said. What is your favorite part? What is your favorite outdoor gear? Go.
My favorite would be my Solomon boots. I am a Solomon fan for life, and
plug in that sponsorship. Please, Solomon, sponsor us.
I lived in my Solomon trail runners in Guam. They were fantastic shoes and thankfully lasted until the night before I left. So I'll take it. And then as soon as we got to Washington, I got my Solomon boots for mountain hikes, and they have been amazing, especially during this winter weather. So, yep, that's definitely my favorite piece of outdoor gear.
Good stuff. What about you, Hannah?
Let's see. Okay, so I have like my go-to favorite piece of gear, but I do have like a new favorite. So my go-to piece of gear is my Osprey backpack. So anytime we go backpacking, like multi-day trips, I freaking love my Osprey pack. It's a really old one, and so like the hip pads are going out and it's not very comfortable anymore, so I need to upgrade, but I just love it so much. I love like the organization and all the little pockets, and I've named my pack Moose. Like I'm very attached to it. But my current favorite piece of gear that I just recently got is a pair of North Face pants. I think it's the Paramount. What is it? Paramount style. So it's like women's hiking pants. They fit really flattering, which is something that's really hard to find in women's hiking gear sometimes. Like a lot of times the zip offs like don't zip off in a flattering place and all that kind of stuff. But these pants are like super comfy. They're like stretchy and they have lots of awesome pockets that don't look bulky. They're amazing. They're not super breathable, so they're not great for like Texas summer, but I wore them on like our hiking trip in Big Bend this past January and they were fantastic.
Love it. So what's your most essential outdoor gear? Same thing.
I'm gonna go with my first aid kit. I stole it. So I actually just this week beefed up my first aid kit and went from just those classic store bought standard first aid kits to making my own personalized first aid kit. that is a little more in depth and a little more full throttle with what it's going to offer, including like SAM splints and ACE bandages and blister gel. And there's an emergency blanket in there and a shakeable ice pack. So I always like being prepared again for any incident that may occur. Thankfully, nothing major has happened yet, but knock on wood.
Good plan.
Yeah, I was also going to say first aid kit, so I'll change my
That's
answer.
okay.
I'll go down. I'll take a different definition of the word essential, and I'll say my camera. I almost never go hiking without my camera. That was not the case in Guam because I feel like just the exposure to that kind of humidity wouldn't have been good. But everywhere that we've been in Texas so far, I always take my camera everywhere because I love documenting like the gorgeous places that we visit and being able to like look back on those memories and like pictures with our friends there, and things like that.
I gotta say, I can't even fathom the humidity in Guam because I think Texas is just so humid. So when you said that, I was like, oh no, Yeah. When everything's big in Texas, hair's bigger in Texas, right? Because of the humidity. You just can't keep girl down.
Very true.
And I can't even imagine how things would react for me somewhere like Guam. So okay, so this is my favorite question of the whole podcast. So you each get to answer it individually. All right. If you close your eyes and imagine yourself in your favorite outdoor moment ever, where are you and what were you doing?
So I'm going to say, I have two. It's difficult to choose. Okay. I'll stick with my Guam solidarity. So I'm going to say free climbing up a 80-foot waterfall in Guam. And just that point when you get to the top and your legs and your hands are shaking from being terrified of letting go. But you make it to that top point and you look down and you see everybody cheering you on because you made it to the top, and then looking farther up and realizing you still have like 4 miles to go. Honestly, it's the best feeling for me.
Mine would be canoeing through Santa Elena Canyon in Big Bend. So I'm going to keep my Texas solidarity. So it's like a 3-day river trip through like the Santa Elena Canyon section of the Rio Grande in Big Bend National Park. And it starts out really flat, but once you get to the canyons, it's literally just hundreds of feet high of canyon walls on both sides, like sheer cliffs. This cliffside just drops straight down into the water. And you get to paddle through that for, depending on how fast you paddle, up to like 2 days. So you paddle all day through the canyon, you camp in the canyon, and just like in the places where the water slows down and it's like really calm, you can hear the echo of like nearly every drip coming off your paddle. And it's just so serene and magical and like overwhelming. It's something like I never could have imagined, like canyon walls. I haven't been to the Grand Canyon, but I had never imagined like canyon walls that high. And it's just so narrow that it feels so weird to just be on like this narrow little river, like winding through the canyon.
Well, thank you guys so much for being a part of the Humans Outside podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us.
us.
This was awesome.
Thanks so much for joining us for the Humans Outside podcast. If you liked this episode, leave us a rating or review so that others can find the podcast too. Until next time, we'll see you out there.